Oh, hey, cool
Fucking
picture.
Skeeter, dude.
Hey, cool picture you got in the background there, bud.
Yeah, thank you, bud.
It reminds me a lot of this one.
Yeah, nice.
I
Still
have
need
a
to get
very
this right.
similar one upstairs.
Oh yeah, you got one of my favorites there, Charlie. The two Celtic dudes getting fucked up,
Yeah.
or one of them is.
You know what? That's actually a very great transition into sort of the topic that we've been talking about for a while. Two
Getting
Celtic
fucked up.
dudes getting fucked up. We've been on a series of talking about the influences of psychedelics in religion. So this is a great way to start the show. What's up, everybody? This is the No Fun Zone podcast. I'm Ryan. I'm here with Danny and with Charlie. Say what's up, boys.
What's up,
What's
boys?
All right, Charlie took that very literally. But yeah, the boys are back in town. But that's actually, yeah, Celtic dudes getting fucked up. That's a thing. Stonehenge.
That's the thing, man. It was
Yeah.
druids fucking eating them mushrooms and seeing some wild shit, making some fucking stone circles.
If there's one thing I know about druids, they like getting fucked up. If there's
Hey.
one thing I know about druids, they like getting fucked up.
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
druids love them drugs. No?
They do, Charlie.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Can you imagine
Um,
just like living in a muddy forest and then you eat some mushrooms and you just like don't give a shit anymore?
right? And especially
I'll
if
be
you
on that
have
all the
if you
time.
if you have no context to what mushrooms are or what psychedelics are, then all of a sudden you're just tripping balls.
You're having a spiritual experience. You're having a moment with God, right?
Exactly. And there's the debate. I mean, like, yeah, there's a debate. Are you actually talking to God, or is this just stuff that's happening in your brain? But either way,
Yeah.
that's 100% what you would interpret it as, because you have no other explanation.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And I mean, one could say that what's going on in your brain is communication with a God, depending on how you see and believe on how consciousness is received.
Sort of like we're kind of like an overall neural network of conscious
Like a
beings.
collective conscious kind of.
Like instead of God being a single entity, God is like the essence of life.
Yeah. The
You know?
logos.
Yeah.
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 Like that connects everything. The force of good and evil. You know, he's good, I guess, of what people reference to God.
Well, he's good and he's evil. He's like, I mean,
if you're separating it into like the cliche definitions, it would be God and devil, I think, right? For the two sides of
yeah, but that's
life force.
that's a very
Or
binary way of thinking about it, where a lot of like the character of Baphomet has been around for centuries. And Baphomet it looks fucking heavy metal as shit, because it's a fucking a goat head on top of like a female torso, but it's really, the idea is it's the balance between sort of the good and the evil. It's sort of combining both of them into one holistic idea, as opposed to just being this sort of binary stance of God is good, the devil's bad.
The ironic thing is that bad and good are a prescription of our emotions. So it's like God would he necessarily be good or bad, or would he just kind of be all encompassing? And it's our emotions that we attach to those things that make them good or bad.
I guess what I'm imagining is like in a situation, negative energy begets negative energy, and positive energy begets positive energy.
Yeah, but
right.
then
So
also,
it's that kind of relationship between generic positive and negative. I think that's interesting.
yeah, but then you have to define
It's just energy in general.
what positive energy is and what negative energy is, and that can be very sort of influenced by culture, like relative moralism or whatever. Morality largely is based on your sort of social environment that you're in. Like in the Middle Ages, morality was a hugely different thing in Western society than it is today. So you'd have to sort of figure out, what are the positive energies versus negative energies.
Well, not less so like right and wrong, and more just like up and down, right? like as someone who's been bipolar, super hyper happy and super low and down, I know that when I'm in a group of people, the difference in my energy, kind of influences a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, which it does. But that is
Because I have very drastic differences.
sure, but I mean, maybe part of that is, again, like that's sort of a microcosm of that societal influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but Baphomet is hardcore. That shit's rad.
I don't know if I ever knew that name. It sounds vaguely familiar. Baphomet.
You've seen the pictures before.
I know when you explained it, it sounds familiar.
Goat, yeah, it's the goat person who's like holding its hand like two fingers up like this, and it draws back to. I mean, it's even almost like a lot of the pagan gods of the Greeks. What's the name of? It's not a centaur.
Minotaur.
No, it's not a minotaur, but like the half goat person, where it's like a goat on the bottom, like Baphomet is, with horns. It was in the fucking cartoon, the Disney cartoon Hercules.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember the name of
fawn. No, that's fawn is just like a goat.
Yeah, no, it's. Let me see if I can look this up.
Satyr.
That sounds a satyr. Yeah.
Satyr. That's getting closer. Is that right?
Sadist?
I think that's it.
No, satyr.
But then when you look at the etymology, if it is a satyr, that very closely, etymology wise is very close to Satan. It's one letter away. And that might be just part of the influence of, like, I don't know. I've been getting into the influence of Greek mythology, sort of, having severe and drastic influences on Christianity. Danny, you would love this fucking book. The Immortality Key, The Secret History of the Religion with No Name. It's by Brian Muraresku.
Yeah,
just picked this up.
Heard about that book.
It's fucking interesting. It's really,
nice.
really, really good.
Cool.
It's about Eleusis.
Yep, the secrets of Eleusis.
Yep, and the mysteries, which is like the ceremony, the secret, forbidden ceremonial rites for Demeter's. I can't remember the name of, but Persephone and Demetrius, I believe. But that's where a lot of researchers are sort of pointing to for something that is basically, a mushroom cult or just a psychedelic sort of cult. And like famous, Plato went there, and I believe Aristotle went there. And they had one quote that said, basically, anybody who hasn't been involved in the mysteries and haven't experienced what they considered a glimpse into life after death, those people will never be able to make it to that sort of infinite world that, supposedly these psychedelics brought them into and gave them a glimpse of for a handful of hours or a handful of days. It's interesting stuff.
I think a little bit literally, just out of curiosity, when we say mushroom cult, a lot of these situations, discovering mushrooms is probably a pretty organic thing to happen, in more than one place. But I'm wondering what other substances may have been involved, like peyote or ayahuasca or, other things throughout the world. I'm just from, curiosity perspective.
So different regions of the world probably found slightly different psychedelic substances.
Yeah.
Peyote and ayahuasca naturally grow in the Americas, whereas psilocybin kind of grows a little bit, more everywhere, as does ergot, which is a small pored mushroom that grows on barley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They a lot of people are ascribing the Salem witch trials to an ergot epidemic.
Yeah. Which totally makes sense, because they had I believe they had a late freeze that winter, so they didn't, the temperatures didn't cool down, and funguses generally tend to thrive in warmer, moist atmospheres. And so if you have a late freeze and you've been sort of, storing all this barley and all this wheat for, the whole summer that you've been harvesting, and then it doesn't get cold enough quick enough, you're bound to form, molds and funguses in there. And ergot happens to be fairly common. And it's actually what Albert Hofmann used to derive the first doses of LSD in the 1930s.
Oh, nice.
It all came from the ergot fungus. And that's actually what Brian Murarescu points towards as the most likely culprit for Eleusis, being the ergot mushroom.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also makes
do they have any? I listened to a podcast about that book. Did they find like residue in wine cups or anything like that? Do they have any like concrete evidence that points to some sort of psychedelic being used?
They don't have a ton of concrete evidence. A lot of the cups and the vessels that were used in Eleusis are basically, they're being displayed in museums across the world, and for them not to fall apart, they've been treated chemically. And so by the time the theory really started gaining some validity, pretty much all the evidence, all the chemical evidence from a lot of the finds are already, it's gone. It's been, wiped out chemically. But there definitely is some evidence, and there is some actual chemical evidence that shows that some sort of spiked beer or spiked wine was used. Not necessarily, there isn't any evidence. I still haven't finished the book, but from the stuff that I've read so far, there isn't any evidence of it being found in Eleusis. But there is a lot of evidence, especially in Spain. Because, the Greek Empire, it basically covered the entire, Mediterranean.
Yeah.
During its sort of during the peak. The other thing that's tricky is it's a secretive religion, much like how Christianity had to be a secretive religion in its early formings during the Roman era. They had to sort of hide their rituals and hide their their ceremonies, and that's where a lot of the pagan influence comes. But yeah, being a secretive religion, it's kind of hard to find a bunch of evidence. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that sort of floats around.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not a ton of just direct 100% definitive evidence, which I feel like is always the case in like archaeological mysteries.
I think that's part of what makes it so interesting, right? Is you piece it together as best you can, but there's always, an undefined portion of it, right?
Yeah.
There's always a little bit left to the imagination, which I think is what draws people to it.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
aliens.
Dude, aliens.
I gotta get my hair back.
I'll go down there.
Yeah, we can go down a deep rabbit hole with that. But yeah, going back to sort of, it seems to make so much sense that psychedelics would be so tied to religion. Even when you look at like, Danny, you could probably speak on this a little bit better than I can, but early Christian art and just even sort of paganist art, it's fucking trippy.
I mean, there's even examples of mushrooms in Christian art. And, there's a weird painting in France, some chapel, and it shows Adam and Eve with the tree of good and the knowledge of good and evil or whatever, and it's just a bunch of giant mushrooms. And so it's like, a lot of people make reference to the burning bush of Moses' story to
the acacia tree.
Acacia, yeah. I mean, when you take those fucking drugs, you go deep within, and so many religions base their experiences off of going within, right? So it's like, it would make sense that the two would go together.
Yeah, well, and sort of touching back on the acacia bush or the acacia tree, that's a plant that's super, super rich in DMT.
Yeah.
And so that's where, the idea of the burning bush and, essentially creating smoke out of a plant that is super rich in DMT. Moses potentially would have inhaled some of that DMT and then blasted off and talked to God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, man. I talked to God when I was on DMT. Scared the fuck out of me. He was a fucking infinite dragon, and he was constricting me. And I had reached all these levels of learning how to let go. And every level was like, you need to let go. And it's like, I let go and I let go and I let go. And I got to this fucking dragon, and he was beautiful. But he was fucking so intimidating. He was like squeezing me and trying to like get to the next level of like letting go of my discomforts.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, if you let go and you're not ready, what you see next is going to fuck you up. And I was like, I'm not ready. I was not ready. I think what I needed to do was fucking take another rip, but I was like fucking paralyzed on the couch, so, but I felt that was my last DMT experience. And I was like, okay, like, so beautiful. And it's like, I really like DMT because it doesn't scare the bejesus out of me like fucking mushrooms can, where you're just like in a fucking zone for like 3 hours,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although time is relevant, so I should be careful.
You saw me in that zone at one point.
Yeah.
The Bachelor party.
Oh yeah. Looking right through my eyes into my soul.
But that is interesting that you had to go through levels. That's almost like Dante's Inferno, but sort of flipped on its head.
Yeah, it wasn't layers of hell, though.
That's what I'm saying.
The opposite of that,
Yeah,
like it's layers of reaching different.
Yeah, it sounds really
and being more and more at peace or acceptance.
Yeah, no, totally.
Really
That's why I said like flipped on its head. It's like a reverse Dante's Inferno, and the only way that you could get out of it is by having to travel through and deeper into those layers.
Yeah,
it's very interesting, and that could be where Dante's Inferno, the story, comes from. But it's just misinterpreted because, if you didn't have the context of knowing what DMT was and that happened to you and you were being crushed by an infinite dragon, you might say like, oh, that was hell. Because you didn't know what the right mindset to come into it was.
I thought, in my brain, it was just, I am such a lowly dimensional being. I can't even begin to comprehend the nature of reality. That's kind of how I took it. And it was beautiful. And it was wild. It was like on my way to meet this dragon. Snakes were everywhere. I saw these beautiful fucking white emerald white snakes with like emerald and ruby scales like scattered through them. And they were like splaying out in like geometric shapes. It was really cool, man.
and
beautiful.
I
would not have described what I experienced hell. They were trials. It was almost more like the Egyptian duat. Like you go through series of trials, and like you got to be careful because apparently, you can be destroyed or whatever the fuck that would mean. See what I mean? Lowly dimensional being, but I was glad of my patience. I was about my patience in the experience, but I think it's because I still had some human in me. And so I was like still a bit of a rational being in my high at that point. But yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, you still had like some sort of hesitation. Well, and I feel like that's a thing with psychedelics in general. If you have any hesitation towards it, that's what's going to lead you into the quote unquote bad trip.
Oh yeah, totally.
As opposed to if you just like
jump on in.
Yeah, if you just ride the fucking wave and just kind of go, all right, you're not going to stop the ocean. The wave is coming. You can either get on it and you can ride it, or you can struggle and trying to fight this thing, and it's only going to be a worse time for you. As opposed to if you can kind of just, this train is moving and it's not going to stop. You can either get on and just take it for the ride, or you can try and fight it and try and stop it. Like Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, when he shoots the webs out and he fucking ting, 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 and tries to stop it, and he almost kills himself.
Yeah. There's Josh Diark, our buddies. You let the drugs do you. You don't do the drugs.
Yeah.
Well, something that you said, Danny, was, the realization of, your existence and the existence of reality and how hard it is to comprehend. And something that's also interesting, I think, is it's kind of humbling to see something from that point of view. And a lot of people I know that have done psychedelics at all, I think, have a bigger sense of empathy and awareness of, everyone instead of just themselves,
Dose the nation, bro.
Without trying to be like fucking socialist or something, right?
No.
It's like
I felt
a bigger sense of community and
it's
empathy
greater
towards your
awareness
fellow
outside of yourself. Yeah.
It's a breakdown of the ego. It's taking that's what a proper dose of psychedelics does, is it removes your ego from the situation, and you can sort of like, that's where you get that empathy, and it just kind of, it breaks down what's his name, Freud, the ego, the id, and then there's also the superego. Taking psychedelics and even just small stuff like, just even smoking weed gives you a little bit of that sort of clarity of just being able to sort of break down that sort of that conscious identity of self and let that sort of merge and just kind of be in the id for a little while. And I think that's a crucial thing that a lot of people could get a lot of benefit from. It's not for everybody. There's certain people that absolutely should not take any sort of psychedelic. But for a lot of people, especially in today's like culture, getting away from the me-centric, sort of thought process, it's something that doesn't happen nowadays usually, especially fucking social media and Instagram and everyone wanting all this attention for everything that they do. It's all sort of self-centered and just like self-focused. Whereas when you can sort of take some time, and there's other things that do it too, like going out and taking a fucking really good hike in nature and going and dipping your feet into like a glacial lake, that will break down your ego as well. Because it sort of like puts you in a place of like, oh, the world isn't revolving around me in any way, shape, or form. The world revolves, it does its own thing. And again, you're not going to stop the ocean. The wave's coming. You're not going to be able to stop the earth from doing what it's going to do, or the universe really. And like,
and that kind of comes back to the perspective, the way that Danny mentioned it, right? It's eye-opening in a way.
Third eye-opening.
Third
what it is.
Oh yeah. Oh, dude, I had this fucking dream that I was like on top of like those big desert plateaus in Utah. I don't know, they're called giant mesas,
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like a beautiful starlit night, and I just like lay back, and this like weird looking Native American dude with face paint everywhere. Like I'm laying down on my back.
No, this is like fucking Wayne's World 2.
And he fucking like,
he takes you to Jim Morrison.
If I'm like laying down and like behind me is the mesa, he like, and like pops up in front of me, like right in front of my face, and he flicks my third eye, and I like, and like I woke up. And I was like, what the fuck?
So when I was a kid,
Dreams are fucking another weird ass fucking thing.
Dreams to me are an extension of psychedelics. Dreams very much operate in the same kind of environment as psychedelics do, where there's like this suspension of reality and things don't seem to make sense, but it still does in a weird way. Like dreams
I like to
are
think it's fucking fat brain dumps. It's just like your brain is processing so much junk that's been in there, and it just fucking fuses them together. And like apparently we only REM for like, or dream for like 90 seconds, but like sometimes it's like I feel like those dreams last hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild. I kind of spoke over you. What were you saying though?
No, I was just talking about this is one thing I was gonna say. When I was a little kid, it's gone away since then. And it kind of trips me out. You know, they say that when you're super young, you're more connected to the quote unquote spiritual realm or whatever. That's why, you know, in horror movies and stuff like that, it's always the little kid that has that intuition. But what I used to be able to do, it was really weird. I would take 2 pencils. I don't know how I started doing this or why I started doing this. But I would take 2 pencils and slowly move them closer and closer to the center of my forehead. And I would get this really weird, powerful sensation right in the middle of my forehead. And didn't know what a third eye was then. Didn't know anything about any sort of mysticism or anything. But like,
That's wild, man.
just the act of like moving them towards.
Do you still get that pulse when you do it?
Nope, it went away. This was like in
the fluoride in the water, bro.
And they're putting chemicals into the water that are making they're making the fucking frogs gay. And Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, is they're running a campaign, and interdimensional child molesters and vampires are real, folks. All right. I feel like I do an Alex Jones impression on almost every podcast I do.
Dude, you fucking nail that fucking impersonation.
It's a fun impression to do. I like doing it.
He's gonna try to sue you.
Yeah,
That's my voice.
I'll see you in court, Alex Jones, and you can come and you can take all of your lawyers. He's almost like a pro wrestler. He's almost like a Hulk Hogan. He's almost like, all right, I'm gonna take that Alex Jones and I'm gonna lay down a big fat smack daddy leg drop on him, and the Hulkamaniacs are gonna be out here and they're gonna be rooting and cheering for me. He almost is a wrestler. But
I wouldn't want to wrestle him.
No, he's fueled with just fucking whiskey and just rage.
Yeah.
No, but that was always super weird to me. Like once I sort of like realized, like learned about the third eye and stuff, and I remembered like doing that with the pencil trick as a kid, I was just like, whoa, what the fuck? And randomly as a kid, I started just like playing around with a compass, like a geometry compass, like drawing circles and stuff. And I would come up with like the most, crazy intimate designs just using a compass and using points on the line that I've already drawn. Yeah. And then cut to 15 years later, that's, the flower of life is essentially what I was drawing. And I had no
finding all those points. Yeah.
Yeah. Where you have like, it almost ends up becoming like a star shape within a circle with sort of circles all converging together. And once I actually
interesting because it's like the building blocks of life, right? The golden ratio and all those mathematics that make very geometric structures. The Fibonacci.
Yeah, Fibonacci sequence. Yep.
That's a lot. The Pythagoreans. It's like their model of God is those numbers, those sequences. And so it's like, what if you're just connected to the essence, and it's like you're just messing around with the building blocks on a piece of paper?
Yeah, but what makes me sad is I was connected with the essence and it's gone.
You still are. It's just about realizing it, maybe? I don't know. It's the fluoride in fucking water, bro. Fuck.
I'll say it again. They're making the
Get
frogs
yourself
gay,
some osmosis, reverse osmosis filters, everybody. The government is out for us.
Osmosis Jones.
Osmosis Jones.
Fucking great movie.
That's a movie?
Remember? It was with
I thought that was just Alex Jones' alter ego.
and the osmosis and the fluoride of the water.
That was an animated movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like Chris Rock, I think. Right?
Huh.
Yeah,
that was a classic.
What was it about?
It was I don't know. He was like a germ or like a bacteria. I don't
he lived
inside of Robin Williams.
Yeah, but I think he was a white blood cell because it was like, wasn't he like a kick off the force? Like it was like a police force.
Yeah, he was
like
detective.
Your immune system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Or something like that.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was a crazy movie.
Huh.
What were we just like really actually getting into? Oh, the third eye stuff. And like, yeah, the whole idea of like, indigo children and connection of, I feel like kids. Oh, I heard a crazy story. I think it was in the UK, if I remember correctly. But it was like a brother and a sister, and the brother was like a little older or something, and the younger sister was like still kind of, still an infant. And the parents, I might be butchering this, but I'm gonna get the gist of it correct, I think. The parents overheard the 3 or 4 year old older brother asking the baby, please remind me of what the other side looks like, because I can't remember anymore. Which is kind of crazy.
That's trippy as fuck.
Right? And that's sort of keys into like the idea of reincarnation. Of you die, and your soul or your being or your essence or whatever you want to call it goes into the ether of the universe, and maybe goes into the DMT realm, or where all these religions sort of get their base from. And your soul swims out there in the ether for a while, and then eventually when it decides, it chooses to come back into another meat vehicle, for lack of a better word. Yeah, it's definitely something I wouldn't ever rule out as a possibility. Like, it makes just as much sense as pretty much any other religion does. And how fucking crazy.
I was thinking about that. I think we said something about that one of the last calls that we had, but whether or not your soul or your essence remains like whole or isolated, throughout whatever journey that is, or if it becomes like reacclimated, with the whole essence of life in general. And that's kind of the metaphor of life itself is the journey of a raindrop from a cloud to the ocean. And then like you are the raindrop, and then you get like mixed back into the pool of life and recycled, but you're not you, right? You're like a mix of whatever kind of, I'm just thinking about them versus
like you are the raindrop until
like this is me, right? This is me this time
to the ocean,
and the next time the raindrop will be different molecules, right?
Even though it still takes a very similar form to the original raindrop.
Yeah. But it's like, then my essence is going to be spread out maybe over multiple rebirths or something with other people. I don't know, right? It's like, does it stay whole like
Charlie's
that?
out here. Charlie's just out here trying to spread his essence to all the ladies out there, just trying to spread the essence, and just everyone gets a little piece of it.
That's really what I meant. You got it.
No, dude, I'm a smart kid. Okay, I read through your metaphors. Okay. No, but yeah, I mean, it's just as viable of an idea as anything else. Like, I could totally see some sort of reincarnation happening, and that could explain, some of the psychological things that we don't really have a good grasp on, of, just general intuition. And there's the idea of sort of epigenetic memory, where your genes actually carry memories from your ancestors. That's at least how, science, I guess, explains it, but it could be a reincarnation type scenario. I don't know. But there has been a lot of studies on sort of epigenetics, and throughout species. Like, I'm sure you've seen videos of people putting a cucumber next to their cat, and the cat thinks it's a snake, and it's naturally terrified of it. And especially there's also the idea of human beings potentially might have lost a lot of our sort of, I don't want to say psychic abilities, but we've lost a lot of our intuitive communication and our sort of subliminal communication skills by relying so heavily on language, where like dogs can communicate with each other without the use of language necessarily, but just, what is it? 90% of communication is nonverbal. And I think,
well, I mean, there's people that, I feel like I've been close enough to that we can have like almost a full conversation without words, right? Like, you guys being some of my best friends, and like my dad and I have always been weirdly like always on the same page. So we could felt like
That's fascinating. I wonder if with the development of language, it's like our brains were evolving kind of with like a hubris towards making sure that we can do that. But also at the same time, we've evolved to have an incredible eyesight. Obviously not as great as hearing as dogs.
But not as good of eyesight as like hawks and eagles.
As hawks. Yeah, I know. But we're beings that have been using our eyes since we were apes, right? What's the difference between that vine and a snake? Color would help. What's the difference between leaves and a fruit? Color will help. That's fascinating. Epigenetics. It's so wild too, because it's like, I mean, if you think about it, and I'm just ranting, so I could be really saying jack shit right here, but
hey,
you
that's
think
what
about
we
it
do
in
on
terms
this
of like
podcast.
monkeys in the trees, trying to dictate which fruit to eat and which fruit not to eat. You're going to be able to tell which ones are ripe and ready by, color from a distance. And so it's like, okay, the monkeys that begin to recognize that are going to, obviously the traits are going to carry on through that. And so it's like, sometimes I feel like evolution has like this crazy know about it. I guess now, I don't know. I guess it could also be explained through trial and error as well.
Well, it's evolution like of the physical being, right? But it's also evolution of like maybe the psychological awareness.
I mean, having all that stuff encoded into like DNA for us to actually be afraid of snakes still hundreds of thousands of years later. It's like, and to be afraid of the dark, it's like, obviously we're species that rely on light to survive. We're not, I guess nowadays it's different, but we're not nocturnal beings, right? So the darkness has always been something to fear, right? And it still holds in our psyches in very different ways now, but it's still there. Yeah, and the stuff about language, Ryan, that's fascinating, man. Like a dulling of intuition.
Yeah,
but then that can also be prescribed by, we're just not out in the fucking world anymore. We're in these constructed societies and civilizations, right?
Yeah, totally. But I also heard something, I think it was something that Graham Hancock had reported, that I think it was, I can't even remember the name. It might have been like Solon or an ancient Greek or an ancient Greek philosopher who was saying basically, the invention of writing and the prolification of writing and sort of being able to read things, it seems like a good thing, but someone said, what good are these writings if there's no one there to explain the wisdom therein within the writings, as opposed to just putting the book out there and letting people sort of interpret it for themselves. If there isn't somebody who's able to sort of explain why, what the words mean. And that's why the Greeks had, such a profound sort of oral tradition. Because that way it's the actual knowledge is also sort of, it comes with the wisdom behind the words, as opposed to just, having it out there just to be interpreted. Hold on, sorry, my camera died.
What's that South Park? The poop that made a pee. They write that book as a joke, and everyone gives it all the awards.
I don't remember that one. Oh,
they're making fun of people reading too much into literature, like on their own, and arguing about, just getting too into it without the author's explicit, interpretation or direction.
Right.
Which is part of what people like to do, right? They like to have those philosophical, conceptual arguments.
There we go.
But
sorry, my camera just died, and I've been distracted trying to figure out how to switch over to the laptop. But now the fucking angle's all low, and it looks weird. Anyway, Yeah, I don't know. There's something about, and you can even extrapolate it to sort of how in today's culture, having the access to the internet and, access to your phone, like who remembers phone numbers anymore? Because we don't have to, it's just kind of the more technology and the more society progresses, the less, I mean, there's a reason why, in 500 BC, the Odyssey was memorized. It wasn't written down. It was an oral tradition, and you had to memorize the entire thing word for word if you were going to present it. And I think that, I don't know, potentially maybe our reliance on technology and reliance on devices and things that make our life so much easier, it makes us inherently sort of weaker as a species almost, because we don't have to.
Yeah. So heavily reliant on those things.
Yeah, exactly. And like we've touched on this subject before, but if a cataclysm happens tomorrow, how many of us are fucked? Most of us.
Speak for yourself. No, I'm fucked.
Yeah, no, dude. I feel like I don't know. I've done a bunch of fucking camping. I was a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle Scout. I would not be able to sustain myself purely on my own accord catching rabbits in the fucking wild. I couldn't. It'd be impossible. And even like the best hunters, in Western civilization wouldn't be able to catch enough deer and shoot enough deer to be able to sustain themselves long term. Like, what's the show? Where they just drop people off in the middle of nowhere.
Alone.
There we go. Yeah, those guys are professionals, and some of them tap out within a week.
Yeah, like some of them in like the first fucking day. It's like, Jesus.
Yeah. And you're a goddamn professional?
And we're all fucked.
Let's just all hope that it doesn't come to that.
I don't have much hope at the moment, which is a bummer.
You know what, honestly,
sometimes it's hard. Yeah.
I don't have the most hope either. Well, and especially like Danny, you and I have talked about, the younger Dryas pretty extensively.
Yeah.
And it's essentially a matter of time before something like that happens again.
Yeah.
So
They say, and then, I think probably fucking NASA or whoever the fuck, maybe it's Elon Musk, but they say that we might have the power and technology to reach missiles out there to deflect comets before they get within too close to our range. But that's still a pretty fucking risky ass game. And part of it goes to kind of what we were talking about before, where we've become so controlled in our reality, and like we've constructed these amazing feats, right, that like obviously are bar none, but with all that control, it's just so hard to let go. And so the fear of mass extinction,
I will not fear.
Sucks
the mind
fucking
killer.
dick, right? And so it's like, and then I thought about this. I was thinking about this the other day when I was thinking about reincarnation, because I feel like so many of us, we only identify as humans, right? But it's like, what if our essence is infinite, then we're not just human. So what a comet does to the earth, it might make humans extinct, but that doesn't mean that our essences would cease to go from the raindrop to the ocean back up to the sky, right?
Circle. Yeah, it would just become something slightly different,
like a dinosaur or like a mutant with like fucking 3 dicks.
I mean, that sounds like fun.
Giggity.
I don't know, man. I have enough fun with 1 dick.
No, but I mean, it's even scientists say that, for every essentially every
Voice.
drop of water that you've ever drank in your life has passed through a dinosaur. You know,
Yeah, I guess
Like,
it's kind of similar.
they've drank that water and
The
they peed it
connection
out,
there.
and then it got recycled into, you know, we're essentially an enclosed system on Earth, and everything affects everything else at all
Yeah.
times. And there's nothing you're ever going to do to be able to change that. It's crazy stuff, man.